Alright guys, so in this video we're going to talk about standard form. All this is a different way to write an equation of a line. Okay, this is going to be our third way to write an equation for a line. Okay, but before we get into that, let's do a quick review. We got to recall what it means to be a Y-intercept. Remember, the Y-intercept is the Y coordinate where a graph crosses the y-axis. Okay, it's wherever the line crosses the y-axis, the axis that goes straight up and down. Okay, that's what it means to be the y-intercept, but just as easily we could do the x-intercept. Okay, if the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, it makes pretty good sense that the x-intercept is the x-coordinate where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, all these are basically just 2 points on any given line that we graph, but they're special points because they're where they cross the x and y axis. Okay, so what we see here in example 1, it says, what are the x and y intercepts of the graph of the following lines? Okay, so these equations look super ugly because x and y are on the same side, but all these are different ways to write the equation of a line. It's called standard form, but we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Okay, so what they're asking us to do is they're asking us to solve for the x and y intercepts, the 2 places where this line crosses the x and y axis. Okay, so let's start with the y-intercept. Okay, if I give you an equation in the standard form where x and y are on the same side, the easiest way to solve for the y-intercept is by doing this. Plug in 0 for x, and then solve for y. If you follow this process, you'll solve for the y-intercept. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in 0 for x in this equation and then solve for y. So I'm looking at 2x plus 6y is equal to 18. I'm going to plug in 0 wherever I see an x. So instead of doing 2 times x, I'm going to do 2 times 0. And then I want to solve for y. Plus 6y is equal to 18. Okay, when you're in the standard form, it works out pretty nicely because what happens? You'll have 2 times 0, and then 2 times any other, or 0 times any other number is just going to be 0, so this guy basically just goes away. And all you're left with is 6y is equal to 18. To solve for y, 6 times y, to get rid of multiplying by 6, I divide both sides by 6, and I'm left with y is equal to 3. Okay, this right here is my y-intercept. More specifically, y-intercept equals 3. This is probably the thing I should circle right here. Okay, so in order to solve for the y-intercept, I plugged in 0 for x and I solved for y. If I want to solve for the x-intercept, it's basically the exact opposite. I'm going to plug in 0 this time for y, then solve for x. Okay, so what do I do here? I'm still going to have 2x plus, and wherever I see a y, I'm going to plug in 0. It'll be plus 6 times 0, and this is still equal to 18. Okay, just like with the first one, whenever you multiply a number by 0, it just goes away. 6 times 0 is 0. It basically cancels itself out. And all I'm left with is 2x is equal to 18. If I want to solve for x here, divide both sides by 2, and ultimately get my x-intercept is equal to positive 9. This line is going to cross the y-axis at 3 and the x-axis at positive 9. Okay, so another example. I'm going to graph the lines using the x and y intercepts. Okay, so what's nice is if you're making lines, all you really need is 2 points. If you have 2 points, you can connect those 2 points together and you'll have the equation or the graph of that line. Okay, so we're going to graph the line using the x and y intercepts. If we find these 2 points, we have enough information to actually graph the line. Okay, so we have x minus 2y is equal to negative 2. Let's first solve for the x-intercept. if I want to solve for the x-intercept, all I have to do is, once again, plug in 0 for y. And if I plug in 0 for y, I'll have x minus 2 times 0 is equal to negative 2. Okay, 2 times 0 is just equal to 0. It basically cancels itself out. And what I'm left with is x equals negative 2. The x-intercept is equal to negative 2. This line is going to cross the x-axis at negative 2. I have my first point right here, which will be at negative 2. This is my only x-intercept. This is the first point I have, though. So I got one point. Now I just got to solve for the other. Let's solve for the y-intercept. How do you solve for the y-intercept? You plug in 0 for x. Okay, so I have x minus 2y is equal to negative 2. Wherever I see an x, I plug in a 0. It'll be 0 minus 2y is equal to negative 2. This basically just goes away, and I'm left with negative 2y is equal to negative 2. Divide both sides by negative 2, and you should get your y-intercept is equal to negative 2 divided by negative 2 is equal to positive 1. This thing is going to cross the y-axis at positive 1. Y-axis is the one that goes up and down. It's going to cross my graph right here. Okay, so now that I have 2 points, I have enough information to make this graph. All I got to do is basically just connect these points, and my line should look something like that.